Welcome to the Karmic Mirror podcast, brought to you by Fifth Line Studios. In this space, we unravel the profound wisdom tucked within the folds of the self-help world and present it to you in a way that resonates with the heart of the collective.
Our mission is to seamlessly bridge the gap between esoteric knowledge and practical tools for everyday life. Whether you're a seasoned seeker or just beginning your path, join us and uncover the magic within and around you. Tune in and let the journey begin.
Welcome back to our series on the nervous system in 4 parts. I'm Allie. Hello.
Hi, it's Michelle.
Well, part 1 was all about that nervous system. And so if you're curious to know why we decided to do a 4-part series on the nervous system, shameless plug back to episode 1, where we really got into the what of the nervous system and its importance. So today we're exploring how our body collaborates with the nervous system, most specifically the body, because in part 1, we really focused on the mind. Today is the body, and then our next drop will be on the spirit. We intentionally chose to explore the nervous system through the lens, again, of that mind, body, and soul, aiming to uncover the connections between each and discover practical approaches to a holistic well-being. This journey really involves discussing various modalities that have captured our curiosity.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we are not medical experts, and so anything you hear today should not take the place of real professional guidance. We really just want to have a very curious conversation. We want to expand our awareness and share some practical approaches so that we can better understand and have better balance within our nervous system. So speaking of, let's just pause and we haven't recorded in a while. So I think for me too, let's just pause and take a deep breath in through the nose and just bring it down into your belly and let your belly expand. And when it does, maybe hold the breath for a moment and just breathe it out through the mouth. And if you want, you can do it again. You can just fill the belly and kind of ground your breath, ground your energy in your lower half of your body, and then hold it and just release. I think so often when we do anything and we forget to breathe intentionally, we're going to talk so much about it all the time, but our breathing gets really high up in our chest and it becomes shallow. And that's where we start to feel, I always think of it as like feeling like your feet are off the ground. And so when you pull the breath down into your belly, you're literally grounding your breath and grounding your body and putting your feet sort of energetically back on the ground and back into your body. So, well, anyways, let's jump in. The body, yeah, anything else?
No, I was like, are we jumping into grounding already?
We're doing it.
It's so good. It's so good. Thank you for the time with the breath. And we were saying we haven't recorded in quite a while. We've been releasing, but we recorded a lot out of the gate. And so for us too, it's just getting that nervous system back regulated feels really good. While I said you can, shameless plug, go back to our first episode. Michelle, might you just very high level, the nervous system, what is it? Why are we focusing on it? Just a little bit before we get into our practices and modalities to support.
Yeah, well, so we talked a lot about the kind of what, why, how of it all a little bit already, but thinking about the nervous system as this, I think we mentioned it being kind of this communication network within your body. And so your body and your nervous system, the way that they work together is to keep us functioning and responding to the world around us. So the nervous system is this communication network. It controls everything we do, from our movement or just regular moving, to breathing, to sensing and thinking. And if you think of it in kind of three parts, and especially in the context of today's conversation, is the nervous system, it's going to control your motor functions. So it's sending signals from your brain to your muscles so that you can move, whether it's walking, typing, blinking. Our muscles are getting instructions all the time from the nervous system so that we can perform those everyday actions. It also handles our sensory perception. So it's collecting information through our senses like touch, sight, hearing, taste, smell, and it's sending those messages to our brain. This is how we understand and react to our surroundings. So, whether you're eating something and you're smelling it and you're tasting and you're taking it in, or you know not to touch the stove because it's very hot, you're going so thinking about the way that we're taking in our environment. And then lastly, the nervous system is keeps us in balance. So it keeps our body's internal functions like our heartbeat, our breathing, our digestion, our sleep patterns. Our nervous system is what helps us regulate those everyday functions. And it's really essential for us to maintain homeostasis. And so when we maintain these systems, the nervous system, it helps with our overall health, our safety, and it keeps us actively involved in the world around us.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast earlier today with Sarah Baldwin, who is a somatic practitioner. I talked about her in an earlier podcast as well. But quite simply, I love the way she said it. She's like, it's our active self protection at every given
Mhm.
moment. And it's a great transition. She was talking about it. Now, this episode focused a lot on trauma. So I'll try, even though it's top of mind, to not go into the nervous system as it relates to trauma, but it is all kind of connected. And she was talking about we have to teach our body that it's okay to be in our bodies from a from a trauma standpoint, but also this is where you're getting regulated, right? Being in your body is being present and having a regulated nervous system, which I think
Mhm.
lends itself to the next section of our podcast, where we really are going to talk about modalities and practices that can positively impact the regulation of our bodies. And when we were going over the outline for today's episode, we started the conversation about somatic practices versus just exercise and moving your body. Michelle, talk more about that, because when we started, I was saying, well, yeah, it's just all movement. And what's the difference and why are we breaking it up? Share with me kind of why you brought this up as two separate modalities and conversations.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that we did because I think it's really easy to overlook, what's the difference between everyday movement and how that keeps us really healthy and the difference between actual somatic practices. So somatic practices are really going to integrate that mind body, which is kind of everything we've talked about for this whole series. So, somatic practices are known as body based practices, and they help regulate the nervous system, they promote holistic well being. But again, like I said, they really integrate the mind, body, and inner awareness, and they can support stress, trauma. And I think where they differentiate is really that inner awareness of your mind and your body connection versus just like working out to work out for purely physical, which is really great, and nervous system balance and health. This is a little bit different, but I think we had a really when we were talking about it, you had a really awesome example, and I was like, yes, that's it. That's exactly
Yeah.
articulating exactly what I'm trying to say.
Well, back to our astrology episode where I was talking about the Virgo rising in me. This is where I came through and I said, oh no, I'm not trying to pick apart talking about the somatic and the exercise. I'm really just trying to ask a lot of questions to understand why we're differentiating that. And then in steps my 3-5, human design, life's great experimenter, and recalling back to literally this week where I have an example of how we can separate the two. So I'm very active. I'm a lifelong athlete and I exercise and work out and move my body a ton. And when Michelle was explaining the difference the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot going on. And towards the end, shout out Peloton. I didn't shout it out in our community episode, but I'm such a Peloton community person. So I might reference it a lot when we're talking through this episode of movement and whatnot. But I was finding myself at the end, I've been trying to push myself harder. I've been taking a lot of Jess King's rides, and she's just a badass and pushes really hard. So it's one of my goals and my fitness goals to push myself. So I take one of her classes a week. And towards the end, I've been finding myself panicked. Like I'm pushing myself so hard. I'm starting to feel my body just kind of panicked. And so I'll press pause because I'm getting so overwhelmed. And then I'll catch my breath and I'll start again. And then I get so mad at myself because I'm like, there was 1 minute left. I
Mhm.
don't like to look at the timer when I work out because I just don't like to have the countdown on there. So knowing that, what's going on? Like your body is just because you can do it. You could have done 1 more minute. You literally could have. And so the last time I was on a really hard ride like that, and I started feeling myself in kind of that panic and I needed to stop, I literally closed my eyes and just really felt my breath go in, like what little breath there was to go in because I
Yeah.
was pushing it really hard. And it just made a world of difference. And that felt more in our discussion of how we're integrating somatic into exercise. So that would be the difference is like just riding my bike, but then being really mindful about whoa, you're panicked. Get some deep breath in there. Let's calm that. Tell yourself you're safe. You're literally on a Peloton bike. A lion is not on your heels coming to get you.
Yeah, and I think that is like the perfect, way to look at it. So some of the other, examples, it's like literally it's the difference of tuning in mentally, focusing on the breath while you're moving, focusing on, rather than all of the things. I think what you said, I don't like to look at the timer. So not focusing on the external world, what's happening, but really focusing on the things that you can control. I can control my breath. Is it shallow or am I breathing into this and like digging into my inner well of resilience and that inner strength I have to push it for that last 30 seconds or minute. And so things like yoga, like Tai Chi, Qigong, which I love, I know this is like the things that I don't know if this is the most common, but on the West Coast, it's like all the grandmas and grandpas are doing Tai Chi or doing the walks in the mall in the morning at like 8 a.m. before the stores open. But
Yeah.
I seriously, I would be probably like doing that too, because they combine the movements with the breath awareness. So it's that somatic practice. It's cultivating relaxation, the body mind connection, things like a body scan meditation totally because you're focusing your on your senses throughout, if you've ever done a body scan meditation, that's another good example because you're focusing on different senses in the body as you scan through. And we talked about grounding. There's so much. We're going to talk a little bit about other ones, and I think that's the cool part is that we're going to talk about different techniques, and also so many of them can be somatic practices when you incorporate the mind body connection and that inner awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other example, because you bring up yoga, and that's the thing
Mhm.
that I think is the easy connect for me because you think, oh, yeah, breath, there's so much breath work in there. But let me tell you, girl, I can make a somatic exercise not a somatic exercise. I think about
Right.
my yoga journey and how vastly different it was from when I started because literally my first yoga class ever, we're talking almost 2 decades ago, I seriously hurt my neck because I was in this room being like, I can do that pose. I can
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
I'm strong, which is exactly not the point of yoga.
Right, right. Yeah, it's not a competition.
But I've seen the journey of how it has become more of a somatic practice to me because, and now I do yoga at least like 4 days a week to some degree. I'm more conscious of the breath and the movement and the lessons, and maybe to come on a blog post of my life lessons of yoga, but it's more of that somatic experience now.
I love that. It's like moving meditation, but with intention and awareness. That's super cool. We talked a little bit about, how to differentiate, but truly, doing the exercise, doing the movement, even if it's not that deeper intentional practice and it purely is for physical health, doing all of the above or together, like you have a yoga practice, you have a Peloton practice, right? Like you're doing different things. It's this truly holistic approach to physical health, to getting in your body, to moving energy, and also to having intentional movement at times when it's needed, to cultivating that mental resilience with your practice.
If we're thinking about just like exercise, I don't want the message to be you have to do somatic exercise to really
That's
impact.
exactly it. Yeah. No, no, but yes, and or you do you.
Yeah, because we're thinking about some of the positive impacts of just moving your body as it relates to the nervous system and the positive impacts it has on that brain. So things like the brain derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. So regular exercise has been associated with increased levels. I only say it because I literally Googled that, right? But it's a protein that supports the growth, survival, and functions of neurons. And what are we
Yeah.
trying to do to balance our nervous system is change the neural pathways around what is keeping our nervous system dysregulated in today's society.
Yeah.
Also and I'll tag the podcast, but it was so interesting. Sarah Baldwin was talking today and she was saying how, your nervous system is working all of the time. And this is
Mhm.
why it's so important to regulate it because you could have a dysregulated nervous system for decades, right? But imagine someone did an ultra marathon for 30 years, right? They're working so hard, they'd probably get interviewed, they'd probably be in magazines, but no one's getting interviewed for their nervous system being able to work extremely
Mhm.
hard for 30 years, right? But as it relates to your body, did you know that your nervous system will literally eat your own muscle tissue for energy if it's overworked and you don't give it a rest?
Wow. No,
I heard that today on that
that
podcast
makes
and
sense.
I know. And it's just, I don't mean to go off here, but the more work we're diving into doing on the nervous system, you just cannot even believe that they wouldn't teach people these things in school.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that I learned would have been really helpful.
Well, let's not go down that rabbit hole today, but
That's so cool. Wait, so what I also hear is like an overworked nervous system is eating at your energy, and that could relate to all types of energy: physical energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy, right? There's different ways that we experience energy. And so I hear overworking the nervous system is literally like a complete depletion on multiple levels, potentially, right? And what do we know when your nervous system is dysregulated? Well, go back to episode one. But a lot of things that can manifest physically in your body. We talked about like sweat, shaking, all of the things. There's so many different and the long term effects on your for chronic illness, on nervous system, on a dysregulated nervous system.
just working out and moving the body and probably we know just this through school you might know increases the serotonin in your brain and
Yes,
cortisol regulation and improves sleep quality. So all of those things in themselves like really helps to regulate the nervous system.
totally. Yeah. Well, and I think that's so important as we're talking about what's the difference between these intentional practices and the very necessary reality that we are humans and we need to move our body regularly. We can't be stagnant. It's not healthy just on a pure base level, but the things that are happening when we work out or we physically move, and it doesn't have to be hardcore, right? Allie and I are way on opposite ends of the spectrum in ways that we exercise, and yet it's part of our daily life, right? Like I don't have a Peloton, but I do have I have a 50-pound dog. Like we go for walks and I do Kundalini yoga, which, is can sometimes in small spurts be really challenging and or long spurts. But yeah, so the things that are happening that we aren't necessarily we don't have to be intentional about when you're working out. Like you said, the serotonin, I always think of Legally Blonde, right? Like happy people, exercise gives you endorphins and endorphins make you happy. But, anyways, but yeah, absolutely.
I love
So,
that that's your takeaway from Legally Blonde, but that you can
totally,
get
right?
extra.
But I
All I'm
bet a
thinking
lot
about
of
is bend and snap. That's all I'm
yeah, but but it's true, right? So like we know that there's that benefit of the release of happy chemicals, of the balance of cortisol, or the regulating of cortisol, which can have implications on our stress levels and i.e. our nervous system. We know that working out helps you sleep better for the most part. And it's like a weird thing. I think it helps you sleep better and gives you more energy simultaneously, which is like a
Mhm.
really interesting thing. So
Sarah Baldwin was talking about this a little bit was that it's not enough, and she was talking about modalities of therapy, and again, it's
Mhm.
like the nervous system and regulating the nervous system as it relates to just dysregulation and trauma, but that it's almost just like it's not enough because everything's so connected. It's not enough just to know. You can know what triggers you. You
Yeah.
can know what dysregulates your nervous system and that it's dysregulated, but it's bringing in some of the movement and the different modalities. And I know we talked about tapping last time. She talked about tapping. So it's moving that energy because those emotions will get lodged in your body and we need to get them
Mhm.
out. And so exercise can do that, whether you're being somatic or not. The
Yeah.
next area, nutrition. Are we ready to move on to nutrition? I think we've talked about body movement. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
I think so. I don't know. Do we want to talk a little bit about exercise, movement, our personal practices at all? I mean, I really don't have a much. It's very in flow,
Well, when I was
but
thinking,
it's
you're like, I have a dog, Allie has a Peloton. I'm like, that is pretty spot on. And I don't think you would ever hear those statements reversed.
yeah. I exercise on a sheepskin, on an organic sheepskin.
I think exercise for me looks a lot different than it maybe did 10 years ago. I'll be honest, like it started out very here's the thing. I can't sit still and we'll learn more
Yeah.
about like quad left arrows and human design, but it's literally in my makeup. I also think that I store a lot of energy and trauma physically in my body. And so, for a lot of
Mhm.
reasons, I've just always needed to move my body. And when I started making the connection, maybe in my early 30s, between the two, and
Mhm.
you get the people, it's like, oh, come on, you're on vacation. You can't just take a break from working out. You can't just do it. It connected to me more of like, no, no, I really can't because I could see the
Yeah.
difference in what I know now is probably my nervous system and how I respond to things when I am very stagnant. And I can really feel it with like a day off. But that being said, rest is really important for your nervous system as well.
For sure.
And so I've been trying to integrate that more. And so it's very 3-5 of me, which is just like learning as I'm doing and it's evolved a lot. But current state, yeah, I'm active every day. I try to do 3 days of cardio a week, and then I do strength 2 days a week, yoga 2 days a week, and, I kind of just will throw in other things, and then, walking outside, I get outside a lot. So that is what current exercise looks like for me and just up and down the steps
I
cleaning
love
all the
it.
time.
Yeah. I
Which is
always like to
yours
hear it.
too. We say like people don't give credit for cleaning being exercise, but for sure it is.
Don't I know it? No, but I love your workout. I'm very inspired by your kind of your discipline. I also have really been, I don't even know if envious, but I've always admired athletic women, especially growing up, because, I was a cheerleader. I danced and all that jazz, which was really great. And also, I always just admired like the other girls that I went to school with that played sports. I was like, I was pretty badass. And so I have a lot of inspiration, but maybe it doesn't translate to motivation. No,
Well, it's but that's the thing is that and we get into the practical tips like later, but it's comparison is just can
well,
be
yeah,
detrimental and bodies are meant to be different and moved different and
totally. Well, and
yeah.
that's the thing is what's so cool is like we both we just have different approaches, and that's the whole point of like not just karmic mirror, but all of our conversations and everything we talk about is like just pick and choose what works for you and having this kind of curation of things and also experimenting so that you know what is or isn't for you. And so yeah, me, my everyday, I like to think of it as my everyday life is a little bit of it's not really, I'm not like over here hauling like buckets of water up a hill, like crouching tiger. Dragon.
No, just if holding back a 50-pound dog all day long.
That's it. Like our dog, I have two dogs and I go for walks, and truly that is such my happy space is going on these walks. And Keith and I, we go on little mini hikes with our dogs. And so it's everything I love. And that plus my daily practice, which is it's Kundalini, it's breath work. It's Kriyas. Right now, I am doing for the month of June. I'm doing the Kriya to make you enchantingly beautiful. And my Instagram stories recently reminded me that this time last year in June, I was also doing this same Kriya. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it's always a year. I mean, a month out from my birthday, I get the urge to want to become enchantingly beautiful.
Very Leo of
so,
you.
so I'm doing that. And honestly, that is kind of a workout. Yeah, I encourage you to maybe we'll link a video or we'll link it or you can go look it up, but it's a short one. It's like 15 minutes. And also it has me shaking. It has my whole body shaking and that's sufficient. It's more than sufficient. It's actually incredibly
Well, it's
satisfying.
such a misconception, and that's the thing is just getting and moving your body. And that, I mean, I saw the biggest shift in my body when I started doing more yoga and Pilates.
Yeah.
And, maybe as an athlete growing up, I just got this mentality of, oh, it's not a workout unless you're dripping sweat and you're gassed
Yeah,
and you're sore for days. And those have a place in, helping our
for sure.
body, but yeah, we just have to be careful of the narrative between the exercise and what's, because it's all good for you. All body movement is
Yeah,
is good and will help the nervous system.
totally. Well, just really quickly, like two things that came up as you're saying that is one, I think going back to the somatic, right? It's how are we aware or in tune with our body enough to know when we're going too hard, when we need a rest, right? Like that's the whole point of getting in tune with your mind body connection is knowing what feels right for you and then working with that and whatever your daily movement looks like. And then the other thing I'll say is we didn't talk about this, but which is wild. I don't know how we didn't bring this up was talking about cycle syncing your workouts. If you are a menstruating, if you're a woman or a person who has their cycle, there is science behind the way you move and work out at different phases throughout your cycle. So I'll just keep it really high level, just off the top of my head, right? So we have four cycles or four phases of our menstrual cycle. You have your menstrual, that's when you're bleeding. You have your follicular phase, which is the week after your period. Then you have your ovulation phase, which is a short window, like 3 to 5 days. And then you have your luteal phase, which is the anywhere between maybe 10 to 14 days before your period. Okay. So quickly, we know that usually right after your period, our energy levels, our hormones are moving up. So our energy levels start to rise. So you're a little bit more inclined to want to move, but in like it's almost like starting a fresh month or like starting on a new moon, just using that as an analogy.
Ooh, so is that a practical tip for those who have menstrual cycles? Is that if you want to get motivated to start moving your body, maybe start a new practice after your cycle?
Start a new practice after a cycle, right? So we think about and I'll be so fast with this, but like your brain body connection, the chemicals that are happening in your brain the week after your period, you're like open to new experiences. So it is this cool time to try something different. Then you
Mm.
go into that short window of ovulation where we have like a peak. Our hormones kind of surge; they reach their height, and so we want to burn energy. So during your ovulation, it's like thinking of it as like a full, like, or the sun's out, like you're glowing, i.e., you might be really oily if you're me, but also you have more energy. So you want to be like, you're either socializing, you're doing stuff, or you're working out twice a day. Like this is where you want to maybe push it. And then your luteal phase, you want to start to your brain is starting to focus on attention to detail. And then if you think about your movement should really mirror that and start to get more, like they say, to do things like high intensity workouts or more controlled movements. This is where those like the Pilates or the yoga might really come into play because you're able to build muscle more easily in this phase. And then your menstrual cycle, we know like you really shouldn't be pushing yourself when you're on your period. Your body is doing some heavy lifting internally. Your uterus lining is shedding and you're bleeding. And so you want to rest. You don't want to put your legs over your head or do anything where you're altering the way things are naturally flowing downwards in your body. So that's in a nutshell, but we won't get into it. But I had to drop that because we were talking about it and I'm like, wait a minute. This is totally part of the conversation. So anyhow,
All right, let's move on to nutrition. Thinking about nutrition and how it can positively impact our nervous system and regulate it. Michelle, what stands out for you when I bring up that topic?
so, on a very just like first high level, is, thinking about the quality of the food that you eat directly translating to your energy levels. But on an internal level, of course, like, are you eating a well balanced, nutrient dense, if you can, right? This is a not, not ever, it's not accessible everywhere to everyone. And also, there are different things that we can do. But just thinking about, when I eat something really heavy and greasy, does it feel good? Well, if it doesn't feel good emotionally or mentally, it probably isn't going to feel good internally. And seeing that everything is so connected. So that's the first thing that comes up. But again, there are specific foods, specific nutrients that are really supportive of things like your mental health, right? Like your cognition, with your digestion, your inflammation in the body. So all of these things that are so connected. I mean, there's just numerous, but in a nutshell, right? It's like balance, nutrient dense foods, whole foods, looking at foods that aren't heavily processed. So I want to make it so simple too and not dive too deep into the nutrition because it's individual, it's unique to the person. And so I can't say like, we can't really say, do this and what, this will work for you. But yeah, I always think about things like when you go shopping in the grocery store, or shopping in the perimeter aisles versus not spending the majority of your time in your basket on the center of the grocery store where everything comes in a box, like what can I get on the outer edges of the grocery store? So that's something so that always sticks in my mind.
Now, if I were to ask you, because again, it's like we can talk about how to eat
Hmm.
healthy, but if I were to like circle back, why does that support our nervous system
Yeah.
so well?
Okay.
Like why is that so important?
Well, I think in a nutshell, right, it's energy levels, it's your immune function, and it's physical resilience. How are you supporting your body to be able to bounce back? And in turn, how does that support your nervous system? I think less stress levels, your body's functioning in the way that it's supposed to. If does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's like
I'm like, am I saying this right?
no, you are. It's just I'm always trying to tie it back to the conversation of
Hmm.
the nervous system while we're talking
Yeah.
and thinking about the body and it is all intertwined. So Anna Victoria is one of the fitness platforms. It's called Body Laura. I'll tag it. And she does a really good job of focusing on her platform on the three: mind, body, and
Yeah.
you can throw spirit in there. But her meal plan, and I use meal plan loosely because I think we usually associate meal plan with like a lot of effort and or like
Yeah.
dietary
Or like
restrictions.
chicken breast and steamed broccoli. Wah, wah. I'm just kidding.
No offense for those who love that out.
Sometimes it's good, but
Yeah.
I'm totally
Um,
kidding.
but she has a meal plan where it's based on what your fitness goals are, your gender, your weight. She has meal plans that
Yeah.
break down the percentage
Wow.
precisely of like how much protein, healthy fats, and carbohydrates you need throughout the day. And let me tell you that after every meal, I felt euphoric. And
Wow.
it just was like, oh, this is what it is when you're putting in exactly what your body needs. And so I think about that from a nervous system. Like when I was in
Yeah, I
corporate
love that.
America, when I was eating like that was probably some of my lowest stress. It really help my stress level.
I love that. I love that example. I think that's a really good one. But yeah, so okay, wait, I'll talk about one of my favorite topics under the umbrella of nutrition, and that is adaptogens, since we're on the topic. And this is something that I have a lot more personal experience with because I love my mushrooms and other adaptogenic herbs. But well, let me ask you, you're pretty familiar with like adaptogens? We're kind of getting into.
I mean, yeah, but I would still say I couldn't define adaptogens. Can you define
Yeah. All
adaptogens?
right. So this is, and when we get into like nutrients, which we won't really dive into. But earlier today, we were talking about magnesium. We're talking about things because in the wellness space, right? I don't know what, every couple months, a new nutrient that's been around forever becomes popular because a cool brand does it with great marketing or whatever, or sources it somewhere new. And I love it. I love that it's more mainstream because it's important and that you can buy supplements and adaptogens in beauty aisles in some cases, which is a whole other topic, which we can get into. But adaptogens are herbs or natural substances. A lot are found in types of mushrooms, but herbs, things like rhodiola is an adaptogen. That's an herb. Schisandra berry is an adaptogen as well. That's so it doesn't have to be a mushroom. It's a natural substance. And what adaptogens do are they help your body manage stress levels. So they help balance your nervous system. And also, different adaptogens have different functions in addition to helping your body balance stress, anxiety, resilience, fatigue. I mean, the list of benefits go on. So I love to incorporate adaptogens into my everyday life. So right now I've been eating mushrooms all week. I mean, this is pretty common, right? It's farmers market season. So I'm
Mhm.
very blessed to be able to have a local mushroom vendor at my market. So every week I pick up lion's mane, lion's mane, trumpet mushrooms, but these are incredible. So lion's mane is a mushroom and I mean, we talked about this. I voice noted you the other day because I had made scallops out of trumpet mushrooms and they were so good. Last night I had lion's mane steak, but just incorporating, so it could be a supplement, right? I do have, for example,
You were like, this is what you guys voice note.
this is
You
what we
so
voice note.
stoked. This is one of the things we voice note about.
And
Stoked about the
yeah,
mushrooms.
and this is what gets the excitement in my voice. This is the electricity.
I'm not mad at it. I'm
But
excited too.
so I'm just talking about this one, but there's numerous. I mean, I'm pretty sure I have like guides on mushrooms that I've put in blogs probably,
The
but
lion's mane you were talking
the lion's
about.
mane is really great for
Yeah.
cognitive function. It is so great. So not
Okay.
only is it balancing my nervous system, but it's helping with brain fog. So if so anyways, there's some really great natural sources of adaptogens that you can incorporate into your everyday life, into your meals. So different herbs, ashwagandha, rhodiola, ginseng. I mentioned schisandra, astragalus, cordyceps. There's so many different herbs. You just look up adaptogens. And honestly, thinking about you don't have to go buy the supplements. You can. There are ones I love. I love Amanda Chantal Bacon, who is the founder of Moon Juice. She's one of my expanders. She's a manifesting generator, and I love her. And I've been reading her cookbooks and buying her products for a long time now. And I still do. I use Sex Fest. It's one of my favorite adaptogenic blends for hormones, for sex hormones. And so but anyways, thinking about how do you incorporate these things that are being intentional? If we talk about being mindful in that connection, how do we use nutrition to nourish our bodies, to support our nervous system through the food we eat? It doesn't mean an overhaul of everything that you're doing, but could you incorporate some more adaptogenic mushrooms, or could you find, a tea that you drink every day that has adaptogens in it? And by doing so, that little subtle shift, you're incorporating things into your everyday diet that help balance your nervous system. So it truly is, again, a holistic approach, and it doesn't have to be anything wild or crazy.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
love that. Breath. Breath. I think we had next on our
Yeah.
list.
Okay.
Um,
My favorite.
I'm gonna let you lead because you're lit up, and I probably am gonna
It's
get
the
lit up on one of our
mushrooms.
next topics.
Yeah. Okay.
So breath.
Breath is life, right? Breath literally, it's our life force. It's our energy. It's how we build our energy. It's so thinking about how breath can calm the nervous system, controlled breathing. I mean, literally going back to your Peloton example, the moment that you start to focus in on your breath is when you start to shift your energy. And I think we've had this conversation about how time is finite. I mean, what other philosophical conversations have we had? But like time is finite, but energy is rebuildable, energy is rechargeable. So if you're thinking about physical, emotional energy, spiritual energy, all of these things can be depleted or built up based on your habits. And going back to the most simplest habit is how we breathe. How do we focus on breathing deeper, fuller? How do we breathe like puppies breathe? How like babies breathe? You watch their bellies expand, but that's because they know how to. Babies haven't maybe their souls, but in their physical bodies, they haven't experienced all the things that put them into that fight or flight or trigger them in their everyday life. They're still able to breathe deep and regulate their nervous system in that way. And so thinking about the physiological effects of your breath, right? We lower our blood pressure. It also deep breathing. That's how we escalate, I think, that fight or flight when something happens and we start to breathe really shallow, we get shaky, our nerves start to increase, or we get anxiety. When you start to breathe deep and ground yourself in your breath and intentionally focus on the breath, that's how you send that signal to your brain that you're safe, that you're secure in that moment, that whatever is activating you in that moment maybe isn't, maybe it's, I don't know, I can't say, but maybe it's not the exact same instance. We talked about this in that nervous system episode. So
Mhm.
you're intentionally balancing your nervous system and also allowing your nervous system to do the job of saying like, okay, we're breathing deeper safely. You are safe. You're not in danger right now.
Well, and here's the thing is that some of the recent stuff I've been listening to, I almost want to say it's like the nervous system 301, 401. That's a little above me to a degree,
Totally.
but it was saying that you can get in fight and flight, but when especially children who might have trauma, and right, big T little t, we talk about this in our first nervous system episode, that a protection mechanism, because quite literally you can't get away, is that freeze.
Hmm.
And part of the freeze when it comes to the breath is shallow breathing,
Yeah,
because quite literally you you're not allowing yourself to feel that immense emotion that comes along with your nervous system's reaction to a fight or a flight.
for sure.
And so, which is a lot of what I was talking about originally, where Sarah Baldwin was talking about, it's not always enough to just know
Hmm.
that your nervous system is dysregulated. It's like you have to do the work to move that and the responses. But
Yeah.
that's a big way that it shows up for me, and I probably didn't even realize that until I started working with my life coach, so in my 30s,
Hmm.
where she would just say, "Do you know you're not breathing right now? You just don't
Yeah.
breathe." And I have friends who know about my journey and some things, and they'll catch me and they'll be like, breathe.
Yeah.
And that's a telltale sign for me now that that I'm disassociating and my nervous system is
For
shot,
sure.
when I catch myself not fully breathing. And I can do that very, very easily.
Yeah.
So the work behind that is moving that energy and figuring out what's making me feel like a saber-toothed tiger is coming to get me in that moment
Yeah.
that I'm not breathing.
And I think it's really common. That's so wild you brought that up. And obviously, I don't talk about like any coaching clients. It's not appropriate. But I have had clients who recognized and said, like, I hold my breath when I'm nervous. I literally hold my breath, and then just becoming aware of it. Then they're like, okay, now that I know, what am I going to do differently? And then talking about, the everyday practices, I think if you practice breath work or if you're curious about it, part of it, like anything, is you practice the breathing techniques that not only are ancient, but also have modern science to give you the backing of how this connects to your nervous system and your brain. So things like box breathing, which is 4 breaths in, hold for 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold for 4 seconds, and continuing on that cycle, or alternate nostril breathing, or just simply deep diaphragmatic breathing, which is what we did in the beginning, which is breathing into your diaphragm and really expanding into your body. But you do those things as a regular practice so that in the moments that you get activated, you can rely, or you've built up a habit enough to now go back to that. And I always notice a change too. Gosh, I don't know if we said this before, but there's something about I've lived kind of upstate now for the last 3 years, but I joke about this, but I think if you put me on a subway tomorrow, all this breath work will really come in handy because something like a switch comes on and you're like, hold on, now I'm like on full blown awareness, and I want everyone to walk at the pace I expect them, even though I'm not the only person on this planet. But
Yeah.
these things happen, and so it's those moments where you're like, oh, hold on, I know how to breathe. I've practiced this in every moment, every single day, or however, whenever I've taught myself how to breathe again. So now when I'm stressed or in a high stress situation, I remember or I know that just a deep breath will help me shift my energy a little bit and get me back into my body. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
so huge. And To Be Magnetic has started to incorporate their summer challenge. I was telling you this. Their first week, it was just getting into your body and
Mhm.
regulating your nervous system. And one thing that they've started incorporating into their deep imaginings or meditations, I only found out today. I was like, oh my gosh, that's why they do it. Sounds like, and I'll put this here with breathing because it's almost like you breathe in and then you can make this noise, but humming,
Yes,
just
hummingbird
humming
breath.
is the, yeah, but even just humming, like even if you don't know like a pattern to
Yeah.
it, just humming will calm the nervous system. And then there is a sound that you make. It's VU, like if you think about VU,
Mhm.
but it's taking a deep breath in, and you can't do it in a high pitched voice. It can't be like VU, but you have, by the way, if you ever hear anyone walking in a park making this sound, it's probably me. I do a lot of this in parks walking.
You and
But
me
it's
both. The
yeah.
hummingbird, but it's still slightly different. But yes.
So you breathe in and it's but you go lower and it's
Mhm.
"Vroom." When you drop lower, it talks to your nervous system.
I
You have
love
to go a
that.
lower vibration.
Yeah.
So even just in those moments, super, triggered nervous system, hum,
Yeah.
or just like I try to do that and you can feel it vibrate through your body.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
It's super powerful. Well, I was mentioning when you brought that up is literally the breathing technique of hummingbird breath, where you literally breathe in and then you hum it out. But also at the end of
Oh, there's not like a pattern to it. See, here I was like,
it's just literally like hum, but the vibration.
we're not getting to your sophisticated stuff right now, Michelle. You can just hum people. And you're like, no, Allie, literally, it's breathing in and just humming.
And
Same thing.
humming, yeah, because you're literally, like you said, you're vibrating. So it's physical experience of it. So it helps calm. So there's that really, the breath that's like two sharp inhales and then one long exhale is like a great reset. But the hummingbird breath, and fun fact, I mentioned I'm doing Kriya to make you enchantingly beautiful this month. And at the end of this Kriya, you do hum. You do hum, you chant hum, so you breathe in and you same hum. And when I read the explanation, hum translates to we. And in the book that I have, and maybe we'll link it, but it talks about how when you chant hum the we, it helps. I'm going to say this wrong from the explanation, but it says because you're chanting we, you're helping to move away or remove your thoughts of pettiness because you're chanting and vibrating on hum on we. Like so yes, both I think it relates to what we're talking about, but also I really appreciated that. I was like, you know what? Everyone I think in the world could use a little chanting of hum of we to start to vibrate. Let's like not be so,
We'll just start calling people and leaving voicemails, just chanting we.
instead of being petty and
We're just here to help the collective. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, by helping ourselves. Yeah. Okay. But so the breath, honestly, we could have about a zillion episodes on the breath. There are great books on it, so many great places. I think there's some great apps that you can learn, but it's so simple, you know. And but talking about getting back into your body, right? We have dropping, which is so funny because we talked about dropping and we were both saying two different things in reference to dropping. So I'll go first and then you talk about dropping because I obviously they're both really relevant and great tech.
Yeah.
So I was relating to the dropping technique that I learned from the book, this book by a Buddhist monk, Sakni Rinpoche. And he writes the book, I think it's called This Is How We Meditate or Why We Meditate. And it's an incredible book that we will definitely link because this book is so amazing. And you can also find him on YouTube because a Buddhist monk talks about dropping as a quick technique that can get you back into your body and also is really, really great before you start meditating. But anytime you need to just get out of your mind, when you need to stop the spiraling thoughts. And he explains this technique, which is literally the simplest thing you could ever do, is by lifting your arms over your head and then dropping them. And when you drop them, like literally just dropping into your body and releasing the breath. And he explains it as like being a kid when you have a heavy backpack and you get home from school and you're like, "Oh, can you just drop your backpack on the ground?" That is literally how he explains this technique and how simple yet how powerful to stop the racing thoughts, right? The mental like spiraling that
Hmm.
keeps us at multiple speeds of like my body is moving differently than my mind is, then my emotions, like we're all dysregulated. And so that's it. Very, very simple. Sakni Rinpoche. It took me a minute to correct that pronunciation.
Yeah. And helps you notice how you're feeling and what you're thinking at the same time to help you connect with how your body is engaging with the external world.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. Well, there's not even so much thought into it. He's like, it just literally is like this physical movement. But what you're going to talk about, I think, gives a little bit more.
Yeah, it's like so dropping anchor technique and so interesting because today Michelle's like, I don't know about the anchor technique and here's how the universe just always will serve. I'll just say me. So well, I said, "Oh my gosh, literally I facilitate teach salespeople how to how to sell. And there's one of the courses I train called compelling storytelling. So how to engage in storytelling. And we're talking about body language, but you're like, what does this have to do with dropping anchor technique? Well, you talk about like really getting in your body and like before you're about to present or, when all of the nerves are up. And I reference there is a doctor on Grey's Anatomy. Yes, I still watch Grey's Anatomy. It's been like decades. But before she goes into surgery, there's such a beautiful scene where she puts her fists on her hips, elbows out, and just stands tall and proud and says that there's research done that people who stand in powerful positions before a big job interview or a big task perform significantly better. And so it was something that I talk about when I facilitate, right? And one of my colleagues said, "Yeah, that technique's actually it's called anchoring or like dropping in to get into your body, to
Mhm.
balance that nervous system." And the example he gave me, which was really cool, was in Gladiator. And he says a lot of people think, him rubbing his hands with the gravel or the salt before he goes into the arenas for like grip, but that's all it's like grounding. It's like getting you ready. So we were talking about this morning and it's just interesting. And you're like, I don't know that much about it. Then you're like, wait a minute. We know
Yeah.
some stuff.
I was like, wait, I do that every day.
Yeah, yeah,
We were
yeah.
talking about like when you tune in for Kundalini and you're balancing with your hands, it's so similar, but also I love that power pose. And yeah, it's so interesting because I love that we're talking about this because there are so many instances where you might be doing similar things in your everyday life and not even realize that, and maybe by becoming more aware that there's actually that this is a real technique that you may in fact be doing all the time, maybe it opens up a little bit more presence and awareness and further, expands on all the benefits of it for you. All right.
Hmm.
So, what's next? Do we want to talk
Cold
about
plunging. And we put cold plunging and cryotherapy kind of together because the bottom line is that
they're cold?
like regular use, say that again.
They're cold.
They're cold.
All right.
Okay, next. No, just kidding.
No, totally for
um,
sure.
the bottom line here is that regular use of cold water immersion triggers that vagus nerve.
Mhm.
I'll stop plugging episode 1 if you want to know more about it, but it's the largest component of the
Yeah.
parasympathetic nervous system. So this results in a relaxation response, resetting of the abdominal organs to a resting state, and just an overall feeling of well being.
Mhm.
Michelle, tell me your thoughts on or what you know about cold plunging, cryotherapy.
The word resilience comes up big time, and I mean like physical resilience in the sense, and maybe I'm like totally not answering the question, but I just had to get out was that I think about cold, and I've never done cryotherapy first of all, and the closest thing I do to cold plunging is like the cold shower in the mornings, or I take my shower and then I blast cold water for like the last few seconds, and it just for me, it totally depends on how I feel, what time of year it is, for how long I can do it. In the winter, not really, not for me. I'm always
Mhm.
cold. So it's not my favorite. But I said resilience because I think on multiple levels, we are retraining our brain to be able to kind of recalibrate in that cold water therapy. So, like you said, all of the benefits, right? Triggering the vagus nerve, activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And so it's almost like when you jump into the cold pool and right away you're like, it's a shock, right? But when you let yourself be in the water, like, oh, okay, hold on, I can get used to this. It's not that bad, right? So you do it enough times. And I said resilience because I think that physical resilience of training yourself to get to just like breathe. And so when you watch people do these ice baths, what are they doing? They're deep breathing. They're using intentional breath work because they're helping to balance their nervous system in a stressful situation, like I'm freezing. And
Mhm.
um, and then over time you're getting more used to it and you're building up that habit, the resilience. And so does that help? I mean, I know I didn't really
Yeah, when you handle short-term stress and learn to calm that nervous system, you learn to stay calm in other stressful situations. So
yeah,
back to the recommendation and suggestion of working to calm your nervous system when you're not in that dysregulated
yeah,
heightened state. And again, like dysregulation is when a reaction doesn't necessarily match the environment you're in, and that's my verbiage of that, and I know it's a little subjective, but I don't know that we've kind of, like, highlighted dysregulated, and we've said it a lot, so but yeah, you see I mean, polar plunges, and I don't think that, people aren't like, "Come polar plunge and fix your nervous system," right? But
yeah, yeah.
people are now buying special tubs, filming themselves doing these cold plunges. I was on a road trip cross country and just decided to do this myself.
Oh yeah, that was really
In
sweet. Yeah.
yeah, and in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of just really natural cold springs, and so I would hike and just go in this freezing cold water and you really I mean, you get out, there's really not a better feeling. You just feel so present in your body. And I have friends who do cryotherapy like once a week and people who are very, very active. And he said he just feels immensely better, just his joints, really everything. And, ice baths go all the way back to ancient times. So ancient Greeks and Egyptians, I just said Egyptians.
That's if you're talking to someone that's Egyptian. No,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not it. Uh,
That's definitely not it.
that was a dad joke.
So now just making up all these random words. But yeah, it is a really beautiful modality and practice. Tony Robbins, I think, does that. His bazillionaire mansion in Hawaii, I think he has one every day. It's the first thing he does when he gets up
Yeah.
and goes out and he deep plunges in his
There
cold
are a
bath.
lot of people. It's actually also part of Kundalini yoga.
Really?
Yeah, is not necessarily like a cold plunging, but yeah, like I once when I first started doing Kundalini, I watched this one lecture. This was a long time ago, so I really don't remember it verbatim, but I know that Yogi Bhajan talked about, when you need to reset, he's like, if you can't get into a cold shower, he's like, go put running cold water, wash your underarms, wash your face, and so I don't I could remember literally no other words from this lecture. I don't even know what it was about, but I do know that when I am in like a lull in the middle of the day, I will literally like blast some cold water and like splash myself, and or I have one of those
Yeah.
ice rollers. And so it
Mhm.
does, I mean, not necessarily that I'm working on the nervous system, but it does give me that instant kind of like shift in energy to, obviously we say like wake up, but yes, I do think and the cold showers, that's pretty much the extent of my physical body that I can do
Yeah.
right now is the cold shower, but I do see the benefits, and there's so many people.
Well, it's dipping your face in a bowl of ice water is also when they say you can't you when you don't have access to a cold plunge.
And again, everybody's so different. You may be,
Mhm.
have a constitution that is very like you're cold all the time. And so maybe the cold therapy isn't necessarily for you. And that's cool too. Okay.
Me too. I'm that person that's always cold. So it was like a
Yes.
wonder that I went and did all of this, but it's so great. So some of the positive impacts just on your body, chronic inflammation, it can positively impact, boost your immune system, lower stress, build resilience. And I think before we move on to just the next modality, which was interesting because I heard today they specifically were talking about cold plunging, and I keep bringing up Sarah Baldwin because she's the one, she's a somatic practitioner, and
Hmm.
I've just kind of been following her around on podcasts, and every podcast I'm learning different things. So I love the way that she speaks about the nervous system and somatic practices. But it was interesting because she said, listen, cold plunging and that type of stuff, she's like, it's great, but not all the time, because she said sometimes, specifically with trauma, is that when you are hyperventilating your nervous system, you're actually re-traumatizing it or causing it more trauma. So I just thought that that was very interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. That was not my experience when I was cold plunging, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So just again, we're not doctors or medical professionals, so make sure you uh, educate yourself on practices before you go buy a cold plunge for every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Before you go get the tub. Okay.
yeah. Acupuncture. Acupuncture involves insertion of fine needles into specific points in the body, known as acupuncture points or meridians. These points are believed to correspond to energy pathways
Hmm.
through which vital energy flows. The goal of acupuncture is to really balance and restore your flow, thereby promoting healing and well being, which obviously can help stimulate all of the things in the nervous system that will help keep us regulated.
Yeah.
Uh, have you done acupuncture before, Michelle?
I have, and so has Keith, and we really love and benefit from it. And on a physical level, and also, of course, through relaxation and whatnot. But I think in acupuncture and in traditional Chinese medicine in general as well, we talked about we touched on Tai Chi, Qigong. These are all rooted in Chinese culture, but you'll hear a lot about stagnant energy. So when you hear the word qi, QI, right? This is your life force, your energy. And I think, not to oversimplify this incredibly ancient and complex and beautiful practice and medicine, is that when you have stagnance in any area, so your chi, your life force, your energy isn't flowing freely through your body, then then it's stagnant. So the whole point of the acupuncture is to help release and move that energy, break it up so that it starts to flow freely. And the other thing you'll hear a lot about acupuncture, which I think is, which can be acupuncture to just, I think the way that, and I'm not speaking from real personal experience, but I think that traditional Chinese medicine practitioners and doctors are going to assess the whole body similar to in Ayurveda. They're not looking at the problem specifically. They're looking at everything surrounding it, so always looking at a holistic approach. Well, in TCM, when they're body mapping, we look at when you said cold plunging, putting your face in water. Well, there's so many different pressure points in the face, and that correspond to different organs in the body, same as in your hands, in your feet. So these different pressure points and different meridians in the body correlate to different organs and bodily function. So, like the nervous system, like your kidneys, all of these other essential organs, that need to have a free flow of energy, that practice of acupuncture can help release that so that you have free flowing health overall, along with all of the benefits that everything we've talked about, right? What else can we say?
Mhm.
Like helps with mood regulation, helps to with, the physical symptoms.
Releasing
Exactly.
endorphins
All of those
and mood
things.
regulation.
Um,
So I have a friend who is a yoga instructor, and there's a woman who does a couple of things, energy clearing, acupuncture,
mhm.
channeling, and talk probably in the spirit episode a little bit more about my experience there.
Yeah.
But I had never done acupuncture before, and it has blown my mind,
Mhm.
the 2 sessions I had. Specifically, I'll talk about the second experience where, I mean, there was no doubt that my nervous system was just shot. I was completely shut down. My digestion and that part of my body is like the central part of my body really is impacted, which
Yeah.
makes sense why I stopped breathing,
Mhm.
because I'm not letting things reach that part of my body. So I was having it's like the only way to explain it is I I was starving. I couldn't, like, I was so hungry,
Mhm.
but every time I felt like I couldn't eat, and every time I started eating, I felt nauseous.
Wow.
And so, and this might go a little bit into the spirit, but basically through energetics, she's like, "Oh yeah, you've got no flow going on
Yeah.
there at all." And then used needles and acupuncture, and I can't even explain the physical relief and difference when I walked out of that office. I felt so calm. I felt so present. I mean,
Totally.
my nervous system had been shot for like weeks. The other interesting thing was, because it's a whole practice like you were talking about. It's not just, "Oh, you have shoulder pain, I'm going to put the needles
Yeah.
in your shoulder and you're going to be okay." But she knew a lot of the specifics going on in my world, and she said, "I'm gonna work on the anger."
Yes.
And there was a spot in my arm, and it is so cool because you literally, like, when she's pushing it in, you feel the resistance, you feel the tightness, you feel it, and then she twists and turns, and you literally feel it loosening, 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 and it's almost like it just pops right out. She's putting needles in places, and you're having, she'd put it in like the my lower arm, and my whole elbow, or like my whole shoulder pops
Yeah.
back because it's the energy moving. So
Yeah.
again, this is going to be my generator. You on the menstrual cycles with working out and mushrooms
Totally.
excitement. This is like my excitement here, is
Yeah.
just because it's so positively impacted. I've had friends who hadn't gotten their period in over
Mhm.
a year and went and got their period. Friends who
Yeah.
attest acupuncture to getting pregnant,
Well, that's
after
it.
having a lot of issues. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, but that's it. I was going to say some of the areas that a lot of acupuncturists treat. I think some popular areas are things like fertility, reproductive health, of course, the popular pain management, stress, anxiety, helps with sleep, digestion, all the things we've said. But yeah, I was thinking the same. I Keith and I were seeing acupuncturists for a long time, and well, one on a physical level, Keith had was literally with the limping after.
And Keith is, for those who don't know.
Keith is my husband, and he would limp after like pitching for baseball
Mhm.
practice. So he would be limping, and so he did a lot of work there. Anyways, hasn't limped since. This was a few years ago, but you talked about shoulder pain, and I had a really high stress. I was in a high stress work environment at that time, and so I was going to an acupuncturist every single week, and it was like the first thing he did was like right in between my eyes, like stress so that I could just relax enough to lay down without being so tense in my body. Because I would come sometimes right after work or,
Yeah.
on my day off, but then I would have to commute into the city. I would get to commute into the city because I would get to go see an acupuncturist, not have to, on my day off. But I was still so like just trying to decompress from a high stress work environment. So it was like that instant having to place them places so that I could physically just relax so that he could work on the other things. But I remember at that point, he was like, "Your shoulders are not even." And because, when
I have the same
yes,
thing. My
but
shoulders aren't even.
I was carrying all my stress. I'm a person that, like you said, yours is lower, and I carry my stress in my shoulders and my neck. And so those are always the first indications of when something is off in my world, whether it's mentally, emotionally, and physically, is when I feel like I can't turn my neck. Like that's, yes, part of it is maybe just as we get older. And also part of it is that's just where I've always held it. And so it was really interesting to see, what working on the different areas, addressing stress levels, relaxation, and also, any stagnant energy so that I could come back into balance. So all that, but yeah, I think we could let's get an acupuncturist on the episode. Shout out, we'll call
Yeah.
it in. Love to talk more about it from someone who is a actual practitioner who is trained and licensed in acupuncture that could talk about it because one, we see the benefits on multiple levels, and so I couldn't recommend it more. All right, so let's move on. Well, we talked about earthing. We talked a little bit about grounding, I think, when we talked about somatic practices, grounding, but we didn't necessarily talk about grounding from the point of view of the term earthing.
Well,
So,
I said earlier, I said, "Is earthing just dropping, Michelle?" Because she had thrown earthing in our outline, and she's like, "No." So I was like, "Okay." So how is earthing different,
well,
Michelle?
it's bare. I mean, it's based on earthing is literally as simple as placing your bare feet on the earth's surface. So we talk about get your bare feet in the grass, but it's physically making direct contact with the earth. And so, I think there's more research, more science to the time frame in which you do this earthing practice, but also like anything, like if you live anywhere where you can get into the grass barefoot or just walk barefoot somewhere on a regular basis, I think it's a great habit to start picking up if
Mm.
you're able to. But it's based on the idea that the earth carries an electric charge, and so when you come into direct contact with it as humans, we can experience these health benefits. And so a lot of advocates for earthing or grounding in the context of earthing, placing your bare feet on the ground, suggest that this physical contact with natural surfaces helps your body's electrical charge. So it's going to help with reducing inflammation, improve your sleep levels, your overall well-being. And so you're trying to use the earth's natural energy to help yourself balance and
Mm.
neutralize free radicals, so things like hormone disruptors and et cetera, things that we take in every single day. And I mentioned it because I watched the Earthing movie, which I highly suggest if you
Where can you watch that? Because you
I
when you I'm gonna go watch it now.
gotta
Where
watch it. When I watched it, it had to have been maybe it was on Netflix, maybe it was on it's definitely on it's got to be on multiple streaming services.
Okay.
I had to watch it again for or clips of it through if you've ever heard of the Gaia network.
Mhm.
When I took my meditation teacher training course, this was part of the curriculum was to go
Uh,
back and rewatch this movie. And but it's called The Earthing Movie: The Remarkable Science of Grounding. And it's got some pretty heavy hitters in there. One of them is Deepak Chopra is featured in this film as well. But I think it won a lot of like independent awards. It is a really good, yeah, it's great. If you're a person like me who maybe is going to learn from like, listening to something or watching something that feels more interesting than like reading it or researching it, or it's going to at least stick in your brain. I felt like this is what that movie did for me. Similar to, I'll drop the other one I love is the Heal documentary that is on, I
oh, I'm obsessed. I've watched that
it's
like
so good.
97
Too,
times.
because
Mhm.
I love Dr. Joe Dispenza. I did the Blessing of the Energy Centers meditation last night before bed. I'm pretty sure I fell asleep about 5 minutes in, and it's 40 minutes long, but I do love that one. And we've talked about that. So the Earthing movie and Heal documentary, two really awesome recommendations to
Mm.
watch to learn a little bit about the science behind it. But,
Just energy and how it impacts. Yeah, for sure.
I was thinking about not necessarily, I mean, it is related, but thinking about when you want to use the Earth's electric energy. I'm totally going to say this wrong, but can do rewire like your house. They drill into the earth, and this is how you power your electricity and stuff. It's really an investment. So it's not why we don't have that in our house, but it's
Yeah.
really fascinating thinking about what you can do with the earth's energy. And
I
um,
know.
yeah.
And because it really is, it's that, I mean, it all ties back. And I don't mean to keep bringing, I do actually mean to keep bringing it back to the nervous system because
Yeah.
that's our topic here. But energy plays a large part. And maybe we dive a little bit deeper in the spirit, the
Sure.
spirit section into our well being and our nervous system. But I think the same thing. I was listening to another podcast with a practitioner who does, and this is where I was saying this was like the 401
Mhm.
on nervous system, like holistic biomechanics.
Whoa.
And yeah, part of that they were talking about, and I'm not going to explain all of it because I can't do it articulately right now, but they were talking about even just your feet, like, and how it connects to your nervous system and your body. And what have
Yes.
we done as human beings? We put plastic and cloth
Yes.
over our feet, right?
Yeah.
The other thing, and I was saying to Michelle earlier, for those who have been around me enough, I'm going to try and say this, but I can get in laughing fits when I think something is very funny and I just literally can't even spit it out. So I'm going to try and get it out. But Michelle and I were also having a little giggle about how, I mean, whatever space you want to call this, sometimes we do have to laugh at ourselves. Like when I'm walking in the park and I'm like, and I'm like, what other people must be thinking about me, walking, like, here's this crazy lady.
Yeah.
But it's interesting about the nervous system, and I'm going to try and say it without laughing, but that your nervous system, which this isn't funny, this all makes sense. When you're in womb, your nervous system is going to be the exact same as your mother's.
Mhm.
And that the act and the pressure of going from like a vaginal birth, of going through the canal, that resets your whole nervous system. So
Wow.
you come out and it resets. So it does not do that with C sections. Why I was laughing is because things, and I think she does these types of things like in the holistic biomechanics, but recreating the birthing situation. And why I laugh is because I'm like,
No, totally.
people, like I'm envisioning Saturday Night Live people doing a skit of like healing yourself by like reenacting your birth and going through a canal, but literally the energies in your bodies is like, for people, it's like that's one thing they're asking, like, did your mom, were you a C-section or a vaginal birth? Well, that's
Wow.
because your nervous system was never cleared. So what was your mom's nervous system like?
Right.
So it was just very interesting. All right, I'm glad I got that out. So there's like a lot of different modalities. I would love to lean more into her work and probably for a later episode because, like I said, it's very 401 type of stuff. For me, at least, let me say that.
But also laughing about, well, you don't have to tell me. To one of my top five strengths is humor, and I find way too many things funny. And I was gonna get into this, but this is a whole other side topic. Is there are some benefits to laughing, to laughter and humor, and a lot of real tangible benefits for our mental health, emotional health, and holistic well-being. But I think it's really important to, especially when you get into the wellness space, because, and this is just my take, right? And I think this is where one of the many, many ways that we also connect is that it can be really easy to get so wrapped up in this wellness buzz world where everything,
Yeah.
has to be sold and packaged and all this stuff, even though most of what we talk about has been around for tens of centuries. But I also think it can be really easy to get in this space and intellectualize everything and then start to take it so seriously that you forget we're just humans, and or we're not just, we are the divine expressing itself as human, if that's your belief. And I also think laughter and joy is such a big part of it. And I was just telling you about the book I read, Big Swiss, which is hilarious and really kind of pokes fun at all of these things. And I was laughing because I was like, I feel like it's poking fun at so much in my world, and I find it hilarious. And it brings some levity. And does it make me feel different about the things that I do? Totally not, because I know they work. And at the
Mhm.
same time, it also reminds me not to take it so seriously, that with the seriousness and with the intention and with
Mhm.
the challenging moments, I get to hold it with laughter and with not being so wrapped up in am I doing everything perfectly right, or am I just doing it and being there and like being a real person? And that part is so valuable. And then the last thing I'll say, because we were talking about all these connecting factors, but there's a woman I follow on Instagram. Her Instagram handle is Woman of the Womb, because you made me think of it. And her and
Mhm.
her husband, I think her husband, they made a product which is a sandal that has like moss and like electrical currents. They made a earthing sandal. So I don't know a lot about this, but
Yes.
I was laughing because we talked about earthing and then you were like the womb and rebirthing yourself. And we were laughing about it, but I was like, I've definitely done that in a meditation,
I know
rebirth
because
myself. I've reparented. I'm going to keep doing
I
it.
know.
Yeah. So,
Oh my gosh, we could go on and on. I know. Well, it made me think about maybe in spirit, and we'll throw some laughter in there and talk a little bit more about that, I think,
for
in the next episode.
For sure. All right. So, practical tips. Are you ready to get into a couple? And I think, we've talked throughout.
We gave some recommendations. I think that the thing that stands out for me most here is that it's going to feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Remember, your brain, back to our first episode, your brain leans towards the familiar because it knows it can survive that space.
Yeah.
So when you're trying new things, just remember like your brain's going to push against it. Even if it's just, hey, I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk outside. It's going to push that a little bit. So I think just knowing that sometimes, and I think especially when you think about the body, right, there's a lot of habitualness in here
Mhm.
of exercise, the way you eat. That's so habitual that my recommendation would be start small and make really attainable small goals to start. And even if it's breathing, I mean, I'm still working on that. I told you my whole fitness regime earlier. That's taken me years to really get consistent and nailed down. And I'm sure it will continue to evolve. But what I haven't mastered and what I'm personally working on right now is that breath work
Mhm.
of getting my conscious somatic breathing so that it will support me when my nervous system is dysregulated.
Mhm.
uh, what I think that's the one I'm going to, and there's a couple of other like suggestions peppered in there, but that's where I'm going to stick with right now. What are you feeling called to share of practical tips or solutions in integrating?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I think what you said is really the most important thing. Like, I base my entire world around baby steps. And in coaching, they say, what's the most easy thing you could do that it would be impossible to fail at? So if that is learning how to just breathe into your stomach, into your belly, that is more than enough. If you can do that, and like you said, build a habit. And I think back to Joe Dispenza. Dr. Joe Dispenza says, that your body becomes addicted to the stress. Well, that's why we do the habit, so that we can retrain our brain, so that we can retrain our body to look for the thing. So when you have that regular practice, and consistency looks
mm,
so different to everyone. Your consistent looks so different from mine because I'm not the most consistent person, but I do a practice every day. It might look slightly different every day, or it might happen at different points, but I do it enough that when I don't, my mind and my body are like, hold on, something's missing. What did you not do today? Right? Like, oh, you didn't do your practice. And I purposely keep my kind of practice really simple so that I can always look forward to it and it doesn't feel daunting when I'm not in the mood. I can, it's kind of like I can always say yes to it. So it's so simple. So I think what you said is super important. I think we talk a little bit about, I mean, we could talk about all the things, right? But I think keeping
mm.
it simple is so crucial, and just giving yourself the space to do it on a regular basis, to just give yourself the consistency in whatever way that looks, to be able to retrain your brain to look for the positive habit, to look for the self-soothing, for the nervous system balancing habit that you're building regular every single day, or whatever that looks like.
So maybe when a coworker is humming in the office, Put your headphones on. Let them calm their nervous system. That's what I was thinking too. Like how many people you must experience out there who maybe are just doing things to calm their nervous system and just giving them grace. I don't know why I was just thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing we had on our list was patience. And that's true. I think that's such a broad term, but I will say this just from working with people one on one in the past is that a lot of times, most of the time, when we're building a new habit, whatever that looks like, we get really down on ourselves when we skip a day or when we fall off the pattern. We start to spiral and then it feels like, well, what's the point? And so maybe patience is just a small part of it, but truly like it's every day. Like if you have to reset every single day, you have to reset every day. I mean, you're only human. You wake up,
Mm,
set the intention. What does that look like for you? Do you have only a few minutes? Do you have only like what can you do that you're satisfied that it's enough? And if that is like so simple as taking the stairs and so whatever that is, like let it be enough that you without beating yourself up over it. I think that's the number one thing I see a lot with coaching is people get really upset when they fall short of the goal, and you're like, and also you get to wake up and do it all again, and you get to start not from
mm,
scratch. You get to just start, and that
yeah.
is more than enough. You're doing the thing. Like you're here, you're showing up, you're trying to change, something or improve or whatever it is.
Mhm. And as always, the grace. We always talk about the grace, but from someone who knows that trauma has impacted my nervous system a great deal, that is childhood, that is within the last year, traumatic events. I would say just give yourself grace and kindness because, as we talked about, when we are triggered and when our nervous system is shot, we are most likely not our quote unquote best selves, whatever that might look like. And so I know for me that shame on top of a dysregulated nervous system is not a great combo. So just again, encouraging people, if the breathing and just the simple things don't feel like they're quite cutting it, it might be time to look into some professional guidance and some support as well. And I'm a huge advocate for that because it has helped me tremendously. Let's move on to the self love check in. Michelle, when it comes to your nervous system and your body, how have you or do you nurture your nervous system as it relates to the body?
Well, I definitely find the daily practice. That's how I nurture my I mean, there's so many ways. Honestly, I think having had some sort of loose practice that involves things like meditation, like mantra, like breath work and movement has been so profound on my ability to handle everyday stressors, things that frustrate me, get under my skin, that make me, where in the past maybe I would go from 0 to 100. Hello, fire sign and all fixed
Mhm.
signs in my big three. But I think having that practice every day, it's a muscle. It's a trust muscle that I have built up that I continue to maintain and keep that muscle strong because it really does nurture my nervous system to not be able to react to things that without thinking or get wrapped up in having those things just kind of like second nature now, of being like, all right, hold on, I just like something happened, I started to get shaky or my palms are sweaty or whatever it
Mhm.
is, and reaching for those practices instinctually because I do the everyday work to make sure that it's there, that it's always ready for me, like that call it what you want, whether it's your trust muscle or your ability to return back to your body, to have built an anchor and not just built it, but keep coming back to it so that, you don't have to reach very far for it when you're in that moment. How about you? How are you nurturing your nervous system through or as it relates to your body?
Body, I think more as of late, I've been just really trying to take note of listening to my body. I've been on quite a healing journey that I think has allowed me to start associating more with the emotions that have been really held in my body that have been negatively impacting my nervous system. And so, as a result, just like that Peloton ride example, I'm being really conscious of these feelings, and some of them for the first time, in my whole life, I think, because of this healing journey I've been on. I'm just so much more open, but really being able to listen. And it's been really interesting because I also think that it's tied to my intuition a little bit because
Mhm.
I'll start to feel things off kilter, or why is your digestion a little bit off track? What's going on? Or why are you feeling angst or tensed with these situations? And when I work them through a little bit more, I'm also finding that it's helping me. This work on my nervous system is helping me get more in tuned with my intuition because I'm now able to kind of access it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, really nurturing it by paying more attention to it. And I think more specifically to the rest is a very, very hard thing for me. But I've had a lot going on physically lately, a lot of movements, literally. So, I've been giving myself the time to rest and I've been listening to my body a lot more. So, that is what I am doing.
Yeah, that's such a perfect note to leave on. I think, if anything, it totally sums up everything we talked about, that mind body connection of like, yes, move or doing all these physical things are so supportive. And also, when you put the intention and the awareness behind it, it's so much more potent. And in human design, your intuition is your spleen center, right? So if it's in your body, it sounds like the more get in tune and start to connect and become embodied through these practices, through every day, through therapeutic modalities, you can tune in, you can know, and you can know when something feels off, when something feels right, and whether it speaks to you through your intuition or your gut or just your inner knowing. You've got to keep the communication clear, keep it open
Yeah.
and clear to kind of hear and receive what either your body's telling you or whether it's divine guidance coming through you. This is our physical vessel. This is the meat suit we get to do life on as Michelle and Allie this go round. And we may, if you believe in reincarnation, may be a totally different life in another lifetime, as I think. And so, what better way to really honor that than to know yourself, know your body, and tune into the messaging?
hmm Yeah, because when we have, look at me, I'm like, back to the nervous system too,
Yep.
because when we are present with our nervous system, all roads lead back. When we think about it's working, it's not having to work overtime when we've regulated. And so we're able to, tap into other things. So, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to part 3 of our nervous system
Yeah,
series. We can't wait to share episode 4.
absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. If you resonated with what you heard today, join us in this vibrant community of seekers, dreamers, and creators. Find us on Instagram at Karmic Mirror Podcast and stay connected with us for additional content, updates, and more. We love hearing from our community and engaging in conversations.
You can catch all our episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts, and make sure to subscribe. And if you really love what you're hearing, we'd be so grateful if you would leave us a 5-star review or share with someone who might benefit from our content. Your feedback means the world to us.
As we bid you farewell, we encourage you to embrace the ever-unfolding story of your life. Life's too short for a one-size-fits-all approach. Remember, your path to flourishing is uniquely yours.
Until next time on the Karmic Mirror, stay true, stay curious, and always be kind to yourself.